We're live. Good morning, Abe.
Good morning, Matt. How you doing?
I'm doing well. Doing well. It strangely rained again today. Thought that was over.
Oh,
Yeah. How about
all
over there?
right.
Yeah.
It's gray outside and a little cold, but no rain yet.
Got it. Got it. So cool. Cool.
Uh,
Yeah. So got some things to talk about today. We've been talking a lot about client experience and that sort of thing this last, I don't know, this last year. Just been really focusing on that sort of differentiator for agents. I think it's even more so on the buyer end now with agents needing to, you know, to show their value to clients as a buyer, as a buyer's agent, right? So the buyer experience, I think, needs to be articulated and brought to. But we were talking about a concept that was more about you say like charity in a sense, but not charity in finding needs among your client base and people around you, right? And budgeting for that. Um, there was a concept in the book Unreasonable Hospitality, which is the guy who is partners with the famous Danny Myers, who does a lot of great big restaurateur in New York City, and I think he's Shake Shack guy, I think too, right? He's done Shake Shack. He started that concept. Um,
right.
but really known for their operational efficiency and their kind of customer experience and that kind of real hospitality driven experience. And so one of the things that they said was they took 5% of their budget and they put it towards finding needs with their clientele in the restaurants. So of doing something above and beyond for them. Um, and so we talked about how agents could apply that by, whatever it might be. Maybe it's not 5%, but maybe it's, you just every transaction you take out a few $100, $500, what it might be, and put it just to kind of another account. And with that money, as you go through your business and you find a need, it doesn't have to be a customer need. It could be someone in your SOI, it could be someone but that just needs something, that has a need financially, and you're able to take that money and give it to them. And as your business, right? Not as you, and how that can, one, it's a great thing to do for somebody, but two, that it really builds your brand as a person and as a business of looking out for others and people around you, and that it can really, and it can be a customer, it could be a client has a need during a transaction, and it's something you can do, but just something that you could do that when someone has a real need, you're able to fill that need and make a big impact on their lives, right, or their world at that moment, right? Um, so what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. Well, first, the book Unreasonable Hospitality, a great one. I know we're still early on. Our staff is going through it right now because,
Right.
we've been really leading with that. I think, Matt, you and I, when we started the company, even that was a big part of what we do in the mindset that we always have, right? And
Right.
um, love what it says about it. I've always talked about real estate as like a service industry, but wanting to like change that now to hospitality. The way the
Right.
book describes service versus hospitality, it's service is the black and white version. Hospitality is the colored version of service, right? And distinction being, it's not just doing the things that give a certain, service level out or, meet certain expectations, but it's exceeding those. It's using your creativity, it's using your resources to really expend yourself and give people a great experience and care. And so it's primarily what we're about, and what you and I hopefully as leaders, model very well. Um, but yeah, I think it's great, and I love that idea of putting aside money to just give, right? And give generously or support someone, and without any type of ROI in mind
Right.
or some type of reciprocity that you would give or support someone in a way that again is somewhat unreasonable or maybe even reckless to some degree. But it starts with seeing a need and really understanding a person's need, and really, feeling the need, in that sense, and then identifying what is a great way I can give to this, right? and just being people who do that or who are looking out for that all the time. I think a lot of times in real estate, we're always thinking ROI when we think about marketing, when we
Right.
think about, time spent, daily. We think about even like, man, like client versus client, which one should I be spending more time with or
Right. Right.
whatnot? It's hard not to be in that mode, for sure. When you're in business. But what I love about the book and what I love about what it's saying is, no, this has nothing to do with any of that. Let's say this
Right.
has more to do with just being hospitable and generous towards people. And so I love that idea. I think um, it's again for me, it's even hard to be in that mode because there are demands of the day. There's budgets to
Right.
think about. There's people to support at all hours of the day, and you're budgeting or you're kind of balancing that with your family, your friends and people you care about also. And yeah, how do I draw lines? How do I, do all that? And so it's kind of a nice way to think about it and to have a framework to think about those things. And,
Yeah.
and
I, li-
so
I
so
like.
yeah,
I
what
like.
do you think?
No, no. I liked what you said. You used the phrase there, reckless generosity, right? And I love that, like those words put together, right? Because it is sort of like some people spend recklessly, right? But it's typically kind of on themselves. It could be on others. You take others out and spend a lot of money too. But the point is, there's a certain amount of like this thing about reckless generosity. I like that idea because it might appear reckless as far as you spending this money on somebody at that moment, that much money on them, and they might think, "Wow, that's too much. You shouldn't be doing that," right? But that's kind of the point, is it makes an impression, and it really does help that person at that time. So I think I like that better than charity, right? Because it's generosity. The person doesn't necessarily need that as far as like, but it's something that makes them, but they need it, but it's not like a charitable thing. It's more of a generosity thing. Like if you being thoughtful and caring enough to do something like that. And I think, but just like charity, one of the things that Jim Rohn had said was about charity was a lot of people saying like, when I get to this point, right, when I get this much money, then I'll start giving to charity. And his thing was, hey, listen, if it's hard to give a little, it's going to be hard to give a lot. You know what I mean? And so just start now, whatever you can do. So that's why I urge agents is like, hey, maybe you say, hey, when my business gets to this level, I'll think of something like that. It's like, well, no, just start doing a little now. It'll build up. And then when you have enough to do something, you'd be surprised if you can just say, hey, that money was for this all along. And I just give it up, right? Rather than thinking you're going to pull it from your own funds and going, oh, this hurts to do this. Whereas if it's there, it's set aside, it was there to be reckless and generous, right? Then it's just, hey, this goes to that, and you build it up again. So, um,
Yeah.
I would imagine the first time an agent does that, it's going to feel so unbelievably good that they'll become addicted to that and start doing it more, and actually probably increase the fund. Um, and yeah, and not to tie the ROI into it, because we like we said, it shouldn't be with that thought. But we know that when you go above and beyond for people, when you do something generous, that it does create that reciprocity sort of, you know, um, cycle, so to speak, and it aids that. So it does come back to you. But again, you shouldn't be thinking that way. But I think it just, if you have to justify it to get started on that way, great, do that, and then you'll see the other rewards of it, right? But at least you're getting started, and so you're doing it.
Yeah.
So
It's one of those like and I know this might sound new age-ish or whatever, but it's one of those like principles of the universe, right? That people have like kind of described in a lot of different ways. It's you get what you give, right?
right,
Eh, and yeah, and so there is that though, Matt. It a lot of times, we talk a lot about commission breath, right? We talk a lot
right,
about like ulterior sales motives and all that. And if you are someone that kind of has a hard time letting those down, right, and not having so many strings attached to things, like one of the best things I've ever heard in terms of getting yourself and your own person kind of in the right place is to give and don't let anyone know that you've given anything, right? Or that you've yeah that you've done this. Do it in complete secret and see how that feels to you, right? And see what the wrestle is there. Usually you want to tell somebody, right? You want to tell people like I did this, I did that. look how great I am or whatnot, and
Yeah.
kind of sit and wrestle with that, and you'll learn a lot about yourself. So yeah, but we are in business, right? And we are people who are in real estate, and we always kind of have this tug and pull of, when does the business hat come off? When I just become a human, right? And so if you wrestle with that at all, I would suggest maybe doing that in secret and see how that feels and see what you learn from it,
Yeah, that's a great point.
before you do it more publicly. And I used to think that too, is, man, when do I give? Like I'm struggling just to pay my bills, I'm struggling. I have credit card debt. So every dollar is accounted for before I even earn it, right? In some ways. And when you give, there isn't just one way to give. It's not just money per se. I think that's kind of the way we think a lot of times. It's it's
Mhm.
it's it's financially we give. Um, but I've heard people that have been mentors in my life say it in a number of different ways, but it really is three categories. It's money, it's finances, it's time, which is a huge asset, right? And then it's like your skills and abilities, right? Or you, right?
Right.
And what you can lend in terms of help, even. And so the practice doesn't begin with just funds. It really does encapsulate those other kind of resources that you might have to give. And so if you feel like you don't have a lot of money to give or any money to give, think about giving some of your time or your abilities, right, to it. If you don't
Yeah.
have, if it feels like you don't have a lot of time, then how could you lend the other two maybe, and give
Yeah.
the other two? Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think that that's where, you know, doing that is a discipline of sorts, right? Of pushing yourself to do that thing, to think generously that way. For most people, I really do think it becomes rather like giving to yourself just to do it, right? Like by doing it, you feel like it's giving you back something. Who was it? Someone mentioned that, like there's sort of a, I think in the book is like a selfishness in being generous and giving because it does make you feel good too to do it. So it's like that's the thing you usually can find is that it makes you actually feel good in the process. So it could be looked at as selfish as well. Um, but yeah, I mean, but all that I think is part of just the bigger, um, or part of the bigger idea of just that wow experience we talked about, right? And that hospitality and um, you know you've traveled a lot. I've traveled a lot. We've tried to live life as well as we can and have great experiences, right? So what would you say one of your best like hospitality, type experiences was?
Yeah, one big one was, a place on the Big Island in Hawaii on the Kona side called Kohana Iki. Um, it's like a resort, but at the time, it was kind of a private place where, they're really setting up to be like, "Hey, you buy a property here, and you get to enjoy the resort kinda club
Mhm.
amenities," and included, like, a
Right,
golf course and, sea activities and catamarans and things like that. And I'll be very honest, I had no business being there, right? This was like, this is like a very nice piece of property, and really, they're inviting people out to buy, like a plot of land and develop a property, or buy a $3-4 million condo. That was like the entry point, right, into this
right, right.
community. And so me and I think like me, my now wife, and four other friends who were couples, went and enjoyed this place. And from literally the moment I think we touched down at the airport, we were pampered. We were taken care of. We didn't have to think about where are we going, what do we do, type stuff. And they literally every step was thought through. And it was a very nice experience from that moment, on. And you know, the person who invited us there, like, kind of gave a hint and said, "Hey, if you're thinking about proposing at all, like, this would be the place to absolutely do it," right? You'll have, some beautiful views, of course, the place is relatively private, and then you'll have a staff that are just, like, really, really awesome, right? And so he gave me the heads up. And we got there, we experienced these staff who kind of were just lingering at places that we were hanging out, right? In the restaurant, there was literally maybe two other parties there, in this big restaurant, and there'd be wait staff just kind of standing and waiting for you to like wave them down or checking on you periodically. But I did go ahead and propose there, and I remember when I said I wanted to propose, the staff kind of lit up, and they had a million different ideas as to where and how and when and all that, and made my life extremely easy because I was very nervous about this, right? Obviously, and they gave me some great ideas, and we put together a really good plan. And literally, all I had to do was like have the ring, and like pop the question right and not screw that up. And so I remember thinking, man, this is the best experience I could have ever had doing this. And it took away so much of as much as it could, it took away some of the anxiety and the concern that I had.
Right.
And again, just every step was thought through. When I proposed, some of the staff, I could see them crying, I was so like, man, like what? Like, again, just kind of taken aback by the feeling I got of the care they had, the genuine
Yeah.
kind of like care and effort that they were putting into this, and the genuine like happiness and celebration we felt from them, and what they
Right.
put out. And none of it was at a cost. Like they never said, "Hey, what's your budget? How much can you pay for a proposal?" They just thought, "We're just gonna go all out and give a great experience here." And they charged me nothing for it, right? And so it was an amazing experience. I always remember that.
Right.
And how about for yourself?
Yeah, no. Um, one story always stands out to me, and it was in Venice, Italy. And I was told by, I think it was a bartender I talked to there, and he was because I had to ask him how did this happen, but he was mentioning that Venice has always been a great spy city, like great like spy networks within the city. They talk to each other, and it's just kind of been part of their tradition because I guess they were kind of vulnerable where they were, so they always had to have very good intelligence on who was coming into the city and who was there because they were kind of at a key strategic point for people coming into Italy. So that's something of that nature. I can't remember the whole story, but the bottom line was that we stayed at this one. We splurged in Venice. Sometimes stayed at this one like top hotel at on the Grand Canal, right on the Grand Canal with the best views, and we had a whole terrace. Like it was like not it was like having like a city terrace, like like you'd see like in a big city on the rooftop where you have like this whole garden, and just sit out there, and it was just a beautiful suite. And everywhere we go in the hotel, they would know who we were, right? Everybody that worked there would know who we were. Um, so it was like, always Mr. Miss Hartman, how are you? There was everybody knew who, and as I went to the bar, and this is the bartender I was talking to, we went there, and it was like, I don't know, it was closed, like it was closed to the public, but he asked us, hey, come in, I'll make you a coffee or something like that, like you want something, anything you want, and it was just taking good care of us. And then we told him we wanted to go to Burano because we had lunch there. And so he said, oh, I'll take care of it. And so he got us, we went outside. There's this nice, beautiful boat taxi, beautiful boat, just a beautiful ride there. And when we got there, there was a woman waiting for us on the dock of the island. It's pretty, it's not that much going on there, right? It's not a lot of people there. And it was kind of like we pulled up and there's a woman waiting for there, knew who we were, said, let me take you and show you around. And she kind of took us, was telling us about the city or the island. And it's a really small island. There's a really good seafood restaurant there. I can't remember the name off the top of my head, but um, bottom line is they took us, she just took us and was really just, here's this and here's this, here's some places. And of course she did take us into some shops, and it was kind of like, hey, you're gonna buy something kind of thing. So there was sort of like a self-serving thing there, but it was just still, the experience was such that it did put you in such a great mood as far as like just feeling like people were taking that care for you, and it was just the way they were. And so that really just stood out to me as far as just like people really trying to make you feel like you're cared for and that you are important to them, right? Rather than just kind of another face in the hotel. And that just kind of continued the whole time we were there with other things. But I just always remember how like it just felt like you were just the whole place is open to you, and it was like they wanted to really make you feel special, and so that's one. But there's always so many little things like that that hotels and places can do just to make it feel just a little more like they didn't have to do that. We would have been fine with just the room. The room was amazing, right? We got what we paid for there, but it was just that whole experience around it, that wow experience that made it something where, we felt almost like you were saying, like you feel like you have no business being there. You feel kind of fortunate, like, wow, is this really happening? This feels like, I feel like I'm like some sort of famous diplomat or celebrity here, the way they're treating us, and so yeah,
Yeah.
but yeah, that was probably mine.
Yeah, that feeling is a key component to it. Like, just you're somewhat undeserving of this, right? But the person who's giving that isn't thinking, "Oh, they're deserving of this," right? They just wanna give it, and
Right.
they're not calculating, what that's gonna cost or whatnot, and so we're kind of in a era of now AI, right? And,
Right.
AI taking care of maybe some of the tasks that maybe are not so, yeah, human. You don't need a human on it, right? But we're also in a era of, like, call centers, right? And automated, like, answering machines,
Right.
right?
Right.
And prompts and, hitting keypads, right? Um, and I gotta say that feels like the antithesis of, like, a hospitable wow experience, right?
Right. Well, yeah,
And so
and I'll tell you this, the
yeah.
2 things that made just inspired me is, first of all, I'll say this, the people there too, I have to add this, seemed very happy to be there. It wasn't like they were good at customer service, like, they knew how to smile well and, like, say the right things and give you the lines of, like, "I'm taking care of you," and this they actually seemed like they were happy, and it was like their home they were welcoming us into. And I really think it's like if some people are wired, and I wish everyone was, and maybe they are, but, it's just like taking care of people feels really good. Like, it actually feels really good to take care of people, and it doesn't feel like a job. And I imagine that sometimes if you have people that are clientele that are negative people, maybe that can rub off on you, and you're taking care of these people, and they don't seem to give it back. But I would imagine that if you really do it well and to a degree, and you really do care, that most people will come around to that and lighten up, because maybe they're upset about something else going on. They've got, something, and that's where we talked about the charitable assumption. Like, if when someone's being negative to you, you don't take it like, hey, they're a jerk, but you give them a charitable assumption that maybe something's going on with them. So maybe I have to try harder to figure out how to get this person to warm up, or to enjoy themselves, right? So I think there's that. But one thing you said about the call centers, I think it comes from, like, also where you come from, as far as what you're trying to accomplish, like, because scale at all costs is not a good thing. And so when I had a technology company that serviced teachers, um, there was a company that when they bought us, I was very disappointed to learn that they put the customer service line for teachers almost like an endless loop. Like, we used to have this thing where the teachers, who there's an abundant amount of teachers relative to the software you're selling, because we had teachers as users, but we were selling to school districts. There's a lot of teachers, right? There's a lot of customers out there using software. And so normally companies would have the teachers call their whoever their leadership was, if it was a principal, whoever's kind of the point of contact for our company. And most districts want to set it up that way. But we had it to where hey, they can call us directly, right? And the company that bought us was like, no, 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 we're not taking calls from teachers. Like, no way, right? So it was like they didn't take away the option prompt to press one to talk to somebody from the teachers calling in, but they made it almost go to like an endless loop that was never going to get to somebody. And that was like intentional. I was like, oh man, that is terrible. That's like a terrible solution to what you perceive as a problem, allowing teachers. And the truth was, we never got that many teachers calling us. And it was like, it was a bad managerial decision from them to say, hey, like, we just don't want to even think about that. So we're just going to end that. You know what I mean? Whereas, like, hey, have you ever analyzed how many teachers actually call us? It's maybe 3 or 4 a week, you know, and they feel great that they're talking to us, and it makes them fans, and they're able to tell, like, we actually can call directly to the company rather than having to go through the administrative channels that kind of would, you know, maybe they're lucky to get the question through to us and get it back to them, right? So anyway, so I just things like that where people sometimes think of scale, and they think of, like, problems that aren't really there because and they sacrifice experience and that connection between the customer and you, right? So I think that's what kind of what you're thinking of, right? Is like sometimes we can automate things too much, or try to, like, figure out, ways that we can, compartmentalize things so we don't have to, like, worry about it. And it seems very selfish. I'll give you an example of that. And I know there's some agents we know that do this, and I get there's reasons for it. And I'm not saying I'm that hardline stance on this, but one of the things I do hear is agents say they get a call and they say, I'll call you. I return my calls between 2 and 5 p.m. And then they have this, like, real boundary thing. And I get, like, there are trainings out there in real estate that tell you, like, you got to be able to scale. You can't be interrupted by calls all the time. And it's like, to me, it's like, there's better maybe solutions than that, in my opinion, like having good auto responses saying, hey, I'll call you right back. I'll call you in 20, 30 minutes or something like that. But that doesn't make the person feel like, hey, you know, my time's more important than yours, so I'm only going to call back between this time and this time. You know what I mean? And I get there's a lot of reasons for doing it, but that would be one example for me. That I think that might not be the best solution to whatever challenges, right? Um,
Yeah, it's essentially saying take a number, right?
it
Um,
is.
and almost dehumanizing the person and making them just another task to get to in that slotted time where he's gonna or he or she's gonna hit the tasks, right?
Yeah.
And it's not fully something that delivers that hospitality or that experience. So I think there's a number of things to look at if we think about it through these lenses, and I'm guilty of a lot of them, and there are times too where I've gotten busy, right? And almost used the busyness as an excuse to not respond in a timely fashion. And sometimes you just can't. You literally can't. There's not enough hours of the day. There's too many things coming in. And so it did kind of remind me of someone that was on our real estate team before, who would literally only take a certain amount of clients, especially on the buy side, because they felt like they couldn't deliver a great experience to 15, 20 buyers all at the same time, right?
Mhm.
And it's interesting to think that hotels as well, right? We have a number of rooms that can be rented out, and we have the staff to support that at full capacity.
Right.
But a lot of times in real estate and in our practice, no, it's we want as many clients as we can. We'll take them all, and we kind of at the same time don't think about what is the experience I'm giving them though. What kind of service am I
Right.
giving them if I'm running around with 20 buyers all at the same time? Is it even possible time wise? And so I wonder if the solution um, is something different than, hey, call me between 2 and 5, or I'll call you back between 2 and 5, every
Right.
day. And that there might need to be either some type of way to cap how many people you're working with at a time, or to enlist more people to help you deliver the right experience, and do that versus no, I'm just busy right now. I'm just going to get all the money I can, make as many commissions as I can, and it'll figure itself out. Yeah, and I know that some of our agents are there, right, because they're busy as hell right now,
Yeah.
and
No, for
and
sure. Yeah.
they don't want to lose that.
Yeah, and I understand at least it's setting an expectation, right? I mean, I don't want to get too much into this one point of that time, but I just think it's like there's a lot of ways to save time, and there's a lot of ways you can delegate certain things to other people to hopefully, Darren Hardy one time said that he was remarking that the most often the people who are the most kind of important or highest positions that you would think like they're the busiest are often not the busiest because they've learned how to delegate so well to where they come into a meeting, they're not checking their phones. As a matter of fact, they might not even bring their phone to the meeting. They're fully present. They're usually early. And again, I'm not sure if this really plays true, but I like to think of the concept of an ideal that the more you are successful, the more you are able to have time for the important things and have time for the people who you're serving. I always find I used to say this to agents, people always say to me, I know you're busy when they call me for things. Hey, sorry to bother you, I know you're busy. And I was like, no, I'm good. Like I'm here. Sometimes I mean, we all have times where I'm at a lunch with somebody or I'm in a meeting with somebody, but I'm not too busy for anybody. That's important to me, any agent. And I usually tell agents like, schedule time to meet with me. I'll meet with you. Like you'd be surprised that I can meet with you usually the same week, and it's usually agents are more limiting to like the time available to me to meet with them, right? Like they're more busy or they've got things going on. You know what I mean? And I say this only because that's the priority for me in my business is to make sure that I'm there for our agents, right? And so if that wasn't the priority, then maybe that would be different. But I think to as an agent, I think it's most important that your clients and the people who are calling you for maybe if you get another phone for just real estate, your clients have two phones, one for that way you can have like a client phone and that number is only out to your clients. It's not even advertised anywhere. Whatever you have to do so you can just know if this phone rings, I answer it, right? This phone rings, yeah, I can have the I'll call you back between 2 and 5. But this phone, whatever the solution is, but there's a better solution, I think, than, yeah, take a number or that sort of thing. And I think that's where that experience comes in, is making sure people feel like they're a priority too. And maybe those people that do the 2 to 5 thing, maybe they call those people back right away and say, hey, for you, it's not 2 to 5. I just have that for other people. I don't know. I don't know the whole plan or thought out thing there. But anyway, uh, yeah. So wow experience, find ways to make them consistent, right? Maybe, but not make them become a kind of a trite or shtick kind of thing. Like, hey, I always do this one thing for people, and it kind of becomes like, you know, when you come in the restaurant, we cut your tie off. It's like, like it becomes like a shtick, like a, like a funny thing, but it's like kind of feels like it's not personalized, I guess you could say. It doesn't feel like it's something that you're doing for them. It's not finding a need that they need. It's kind of just like, this is what I do. It makes it still about yourself, right? So maybe find a way that you can systemize things in such a way that it allows you to see that person, that customer, and do something for them specifically, but that you have that as part of your philosophy and part of your way of doing business, right? So, um,
Yeah, yeah, and system isn't the like opposite of that, right? System is what you need to make sure that in some ways you're thinking about these things and delivering these things really well, right? And part of the
yeah,
system may be to include, again, just some time where you get to know a client a little bit more than, hey,
right,
what kind of house are you looking for, or price do you want to sell for? It's taking the time to really get to know and understand a client, and then thoughtfully responding with something that delivers a wow experience for them specifically. You're a vegan, Matt. I would never, if you were my client, say, well, this is the thing I do. I take all my
right.
clients out to a steak restaurant,
Yeah.
right?
Here's your Ruth's Chris steak card or gift card.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly, right. Again, very easy example, but I think if we really look at what we do and how we do it, and it maybe the systems and how rigid they are, they should never be so rigid that you don't think about the person and who they are, understand who
Right.
they are, and respond appropriately. Um, so yeah, and then what really differentiates you as a person in real estate or as a person in sales or just a person in general, I think is, at not just, for business sake, but in other areas and aspects of your life, are you delivering a wow experience, right? And it's hard to keep that up all the time, I know. But is the way you treat your clients, is that seen in the way you treat your kids, your family, right? Your
Yeah.
friends, even? Is it authentic? I guess is what I'm getting at. And the best way to check that is to see if you do that across the board, versus when there's just some profit on the table, or some type of, I don't know, networking value or something like that, right?
Right.
And you said this really well, Matt. You're right. Anyone can call us, right? Anyone can schedule time, and when people call and say, "I'm so sorry, I know you're busy," it's almost like they assume that they're like down in the pecking order of some,
Right.
or like they devalue themselves in our eyes in some way, and that's not the case actually. And we say this to agents too, hey, you kind of treat the person who just did a lease with you the same, in terms of care and quality experience, as the person who just sold a $5 million home with you, right? And keep that consistent. And I know sometimes you have to prioritize things, but at the same time, like you don't put one mask on and then take it off for another. Hopefully you don't have to put any masks on, and you're
Right.
delivering that wow experience to everyone. That's just who you are. And so, and yeah, so I hope that's what it is, and that's a challenge even for myself at times, right? And how I, spend time with people, how much time I give to people, how much thought I give into the hangout we're about to have, right? Yeah, and really, again, think through thoughtfully what that experience can be for those people.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Um, yeah, I think I think that's where, what I would just urge agents to do is just try to figure out how to make it habit of trying to just be thoughtful and to uh, you know not be afraid of being rejected with your generosity, right? there's times in life where you feel like, you try to do something nice and it doesn't feel like you pulled it off well or you did something. But I just think it's like, you know, I think sometimes we overthink things. I remember, there's been times in my life for sure. I've done this a lot actually. It's been maybe some of the people can relate to this, but where I want to be so thoughtful that I overthink it and I think and I think and I don't do anything. And it's like it's like if I would have just said, "Hey, this is good enough," it's because it's a thought. The whole expression, right? The thought that counts, right? But the thing is, but it's really true, right? It is often just the thought that counts. Like, right? Like if I'm gonna go take some donuts to somebody, right? Because I know they're having like a yard sale, and I'm like, hey, I'll take some donuts down there to and I'm thinking like, which donut place do I want to go to? And I overthink like which one, what kind of donuts would they like? Do they like this? This. And the point is, it's donuts. Just go buy some donuts and take it to them, right? Like don't overthink it. Yeah, go to some place is kind of good, but don't have to think like what will they like and what this. Just go up there and to it. So I think sometimes we do that, or at least I have done that. So I'm sure other people out there have done the same thing. Um, but yeah, so I think just make it a habit to start just giving, being thoughtful, and thinking about your experience that way, and only systemize it in as such that you think about like how am I going to make this fit into my day to think about these things, but not to systemize like like everybody gets a bottle of this type of whiskey. It's like, well, some people don't drink, right? So you can't have it that way systemized. It has to be just you have to make room for it in your business. And then bring that philosophy. But so yeah, so where are we at here? Got some time left. Do you want to move on to talking about the NAR and DOJ update?
Yeah.
What do you think? Yeah.
Yeah.
Fun stuff.
And I will say it does feel like this comes up a lot with us. I'm
Yeah.
sure some people are tired of hearing about it.
I
Um,
agree. I'm tired of speaking
there
about it.
are
Yeah.
people yeah, there's people that also are like, "Please, tell us everything's gonna be okay," and just want their fears kind of relieved. But there was a substantial kind of piece of news that came out this past week, and so we thought it important to touch on it and to share kind of what that can mean. And again, everything is still up in the air to some degree. A lot
Right.
of what was shared is like opinion letters, really, for the most part. But there was a significant one that may start shaping what our practice is, and so we thought it'd be good to bring it up.
Yeah. So I think it's important to first remember that the practice changes, right? The two main ones is like not offering the compensation on the MLS, and then it's second is having a buyer agreement to go even see a property, right? Those two main practice changes aren't laws, right? They're not laws. It's not required legally. It's a agreement to settle a lawsuit to which if we don't do that, then we've violated the settlement, right? And not only we violated that settlement, but we could open ourselves up to more lawsuits based on the same type of grounds. So the settlement is actually trying to solve what the complaints were in these lawsuits, right? So it's saying, okay, we will no longer do things this way. It could become law at some point, but it doesn't need to because it's basically a settlement that will be reopened and if we violate that settlement, right? So that being said, the the DOJ, though, on the other hand, does have some problems with also the practices of real estate. And so the DOJ has been weighing in and has even investigated our National Association of Realtors and had it open investigation that was closed and then they reopened it. But the point is the DOJ has been just watching all this to see, hey, will this settle itself? Will this kind of fix itself or do we have to get involved again? And so they're there on the mountain looking down at us and we know they're there and so we're going, hey, how do we make sure they don't come down that mountain toward like how do we kind of fix what they don't want to see? And so they just kind of weighed in recently with saying we don't want to see uh, uh, Leo is the woman's name, last name Leo. I can't think of her first name, but she's the DOJ person kind of overseeing this attorney for them. That's kind of has the as this has her kind of case here. She said, I don't want to see offers of compensation anywhere. So not just on the MLS, but if I have like we talked about the workaround of having a website where our listings have the compensation, or even like maybe a supplement or some other way. And early on, I had kind of talked about this. I thought, I don't think we're going to be able to do workarounds, right? Like that would kind of that would not really satisfy the real spirit of this arrangement. And there were kind of right away some workarounds. And so the way I look at it is we don't know, like you said, we don't know what's going to happen. This speculation. But the DOJ definitely is very interested in us, very interested in our practices, and has made it very clear that what they don't want to do is us price fix in any way by offering a unilateral compensation for somebody servicing someone who has no say in that compensation for the person that's representing them, right? And that's the bottom line. So, however we try to work around that, uh, I think they're going to have a problem with. So, the question is, will CAR evaluate this now at this point for us? Because CAR, California Institute of Realtors, they're the ones who make our agreements to say we're not going to put anywhere in our contracts at all that a seller can pre-agree to some sort of unilateral compensation, right? Even if it's not published on the MLS, we don't want it at all. That's my thinking. I could be wrong. We'll see how things go. But I had thought maybe there was a chance that we could say sellers can still offer that, but we don't publish it, but it's still there. I'm thinking maybe it's not. I'm thinking maybe it's just going to be submit, what you and your buyer have agreed to pay you, and submit that to us. Which again is kind of how I think was thinking things were going to go anyway. But I think we started kind of backtracking and kind of going, no, maybe we can just have an agreement. So that's where I am with this. So my takeaway that's actionable about this is just to remember, you need to get a buyer consultation going in your business. You need to justify your value to buyers. You need to get them to agree to pay you for your services because they see it as valuable. And then you can go make offers and ask for that commission confidently without having to hope that it was already kind of pre-done for you by the listing agent. And so that's my thought on that, where that will lead. But I think that's the development that's significant. But go ahead, Abe. What are your thoughts on it?
I still think about commercial real estate and what we see on that side, and not worried at all about that kind of comment from the lawyer that represents the DOJ. On the commercial end, there really isn't, I guess, aside from the MLS itself, you put a commercial property in there, any offer of compensation shown, right? Usually it's submitted with an LOI or the offer, and it's evaluated from the seller as to the whole deal, right? Like the net that the seller will look at, and it's looked at very mathematically in that sense. And so I imagine in residential would be somewhat similar. And
Yeah.
again, it's nothing to be scared of, right?
Right.
Nothing to be too worried about there.
Yeah. I'm not scared or worried about this at all, and I don't think we should be at all. I think it's just what I think is like, just to again to prepare for this, as far as make sure you're right. Question for you: in commercial, though, when you take a commercial listing agreement, does the commission that you take in that listing agreement usually cover what's going to be ultimately shared with the buyer, though?
It can, and it doesn't have to.
Okay.
Yeah, it's the same way now. And again, maybe you're alluding to, hey, then for us on the residential side, we can't have that even memorialized in a contract up front, from a seller. Maybe that becomes the case. But I think on the commercial side, for the most part, and this is, again, there's exceptions. The sellers know that in order to get top dollar and to also get as many eyes and people looking at my property interested in it, there should be some type of offer to you know buyers agents
Got it.
who have a buyer that may make an offer. And so um, yeah, and in the commercial, the listing agreements are sometimes the commission part of it is a completely separate document from your normal listing agreement. And so
Okay.
it is pretty flex. But and also this, buyers agents, when they make the offer, they may not put it on the LOI. They may put on the LOI that the commission is subject to a separate agreement, right? But the buyer's agent will take no less than half the overall commission, right? Or at the very
Mhm.
least this percentage, right? And so there's a couple of different ways they structure that to try to get what they feel like they can get, right? And not leave a dollar on the table there.
Right.
So I imagine we'll see some of that practice. But to your point, no, absolutely. Like again, I don't think it's anything people need to be worried about. but having an agreement up front with your buyer on what you're targeting in terms of your compensation, and then again, kind of substantiating that and why you're worth that money, right, is an important thing. And the context of this is the DOJ is just not coming down on the real estate industry or the residential real estate industry. They're coming down on anything that feels like antitrust or anti-competitive, right?
Right.
There was news this week that they want to look at Ticketmaster and Live Nation and quote unquote break it up, right? Because they have such a control on that whole vertical.
Right. Right.
And so what are they trying to do with us? Is it really like scrutinize us hard, and maybe do sting operations on us now to see if we're like abiding by the letter of the law? I think it really is to break up practices that may lend to price fixing, that may be unfair even for buyers or sellers, right? To just have as unchecked practices, and so um, I think what we've been saying all along still stands, of course, that value, people will pay for the value they feel they're getting.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so, yeah, in that sense, practice wise too, I get it. You got to protect yourself. You got to have a system so that you are explaining your value, and that's all up front. It's not negotiated at the the offer table,
Well,
right?
right. Well, yeah,
Um,
well, 'cause one thing the DOJ also said, not this time, but in an earlier letter that kind of alludes to why this is, but they said they don't wanna see the listing brokerage paying the buyer brokerage at all, right? They don't wanna see that arrangement anymore at all. They wanna see the seller paying or the buyer paying, but they don't want me as a listing broker sharing my commission with you. They don't want me paying you as a buyer's agent. You're the buyer's agent, either the buyer pays you or the buyer asks the seller to pay you, but the listing brokerage should no longer pay the buyer's agent, right? And that's kind of one of the things here that's what that avoids is like not having a contract. So, like, if I see it, like, if I was talking to a seller right now, which I have, and you say, listen, you're going to have like kind of three options. Either you figure out what you want to pay right now and kind of have that front loaded, like, what you want to pay the buyer's agent so I can have those conversations. Two, you can tell them just to submit, hey, submit with your offer what you want to be paid based on your agreement. Or three, saying, I'm not paying anything. No, those are basically the three main options, right? Um, and so now it's like that first option of saying, hey, you can kind of pre-decide. It's going to be more of like a verbal thing that we just kind of talk about, like, yeah, I'm okay with this. And that way I can kind of go, I think the seller's okay with this. And we can kind of give that, but it won't be necessarily written down or advertised anywhere, right? It's kind of more like, yeah, I think that we can make that work kind of conversation. And then make sure you have that conversation with your seller so it's not a fiduciary duty obligation, that you've had that conversation and they've given you the green light to actually say those things. So it's gonna be interesting. But I think that here's what I think though. I think that the agents who have the most wishful thinking, again, nothing wrong with this, but is like, hey, I can use a Zillow touring agreement that says they have to pay me anything to show them this house. They like the house. I immediately call the agent and I say, "What's the seller willing to pay?" And they say 2%. And then I can go to my buyer and go, "Hey, don't worry. The seller said they're willing to pay me 2%. Just sign an agreement here saying 2%, and then we'll make the offer." Like that would be the least resistance kind of whole methodology, almost like it always has been, right? Like there's not much difference there. They're signing a really easy agreement to sign that Zillow made, just and then you can make sure that the seller's willing to pay your commission before you have to ask him for it. Like that would be fantastic if things worked out that way, right? But I just think it's going to be a little more challenging than that, as far as like how we have to do things. So I think that's just why I want to make sure people are getting ready for that. Like that's going to be a little bit more. And again, if it works out being that easy, a lot of the time, well, fantastic. Like then that's great. That's great for for everybody. But it's like just want to make sure that people are preparing for something a little bit more challenging than that right now in their businesses and getting good at the buyer con. And I talked to an agent last week who said you said to get ready for this, so I did a buyer consultation. I sent the agent like how to fill out the buyer broker agreement and do that, and they did a great job, and it was a great consultation. The person was fine with it, but I think it's just like I really hope people take the advice to just get in the practice of doing buyer consultations right now. Get in the practice of articulating that value and getting people to understand how the commission is going to work. But yeah,
yeah. If you don't have the value, you should be worried, right?
yeah,
I think that's why we're talking about all this stuff, right? The wow experience, all that stuff. It really is to help, agents, create an experience that is valuable. So there's no mistaken, value there, right? There's no lacking. And so are we saying, hey, just get in the practice of having everyone sign an agreement? No, it's articulate your value that then leads them to signing an agreement, right?
Right, right,
And you'll be surprised at the response, I think, maybe positive and negative, right?
right,
And maybe if it's negative, you need to hone what your value really is and have a good expression of that. And
right.
so in those ways, yeah, absolutely. Get ready, and sharpen your game, right? And up your game. Create the
Yeah,
wow experience.
yeah.
And the fear will go down, I think, for the people that are fearful. Um,
You'll get paid more.
yeah.
You will get paid more. You do these things. The order is deliver a wow experience. Make sure you do have an amazing, service offering for buyers. Then learn how to articulate that. Because when you have it, if I just said to you, "Hey, can you give me the trailer for the movie?" and you don't know what the movie is, and you don't have the movie written yet, how are you going to do a trailer, right? And so the point is, you have to have the movie first. Then you can do the trailer to get people to want to come watch it. So you have to have the product first. Then you know then you can talk about that product and get someone to understand the value of that product you're going to be giving them. And then yeah, the contract is just basically just a what do you call it? Putting it in writing the relationship you're agreeing to have with that person. It's not like, "Oh, I got the contract signed." It's not like that's the wrong way to look at it. The contract is simply just
Aha! I got you. I
yeah,
got you. You're mine.
yeah.
I'm gonna make money.
If somebody
Got
said to
it.
me like, "I didn't have to do the presentation. I just got the contract signed. I just told them they had to sign it and they signed it." That right there, I go, "Oh, that." At that point, it's like, "Okay, you're not getting this." That's so yeah, and so yeah, the goal is to win the client through them really believing in what you're going to do for them and then delivering on that, right? That's the goal, and the contract's a side product of that, and albeit necessary now, but yeah. So I think we covered that. I think the truth is, yes, no, nothing to fear, nothing different, but just understand, just setting the right expectations for everybody to know what's going to be happening. And we had some questions, right, from agents to answer, right? Do you want to touch on those real
We
quick before
do,
we
we
jump
do.
off?
Yeah,
Do you have
and
them?
maybe again, we want this to be a good segment too, because we want this to be valuable for everyone listening. And so if you do have questions, whether they're sales related, they are specific to a transaction or whatnot, if they're more you know mindset related, whatever it is, we'd love to hear from you. That way we can kind of tailor what we do here. But we do have a few, and I think these are relatively easy, hopefully. We can knock them out and then bring some value. So, one of the questions is this person has aging parents, have a couple properties in their name. Should they be advised to put it into a living trust or put the properties into a living trust? And if so, who is someone you would recommend to help them with that? So yeah, um,
Yeah. Well, first of
maybe
all, not
I'll hit
legal
that one.
advice. We're not
Yeah,
lawyers, but but as brokers
exactly,
who've seen a
exactly.
lot, um, I would say
Yeah,
absolutely,
yeah.
right? Good.
100%. It's something that probably Matt and I have both done for our own properties and our own assets, especially if they're aging parents. What it does, it avoids a lot of the work that people have to do after someone's passed away, in figuring it all out, right? And we've seen this too often, arguments, disagreements, lawsuits, because what was left wasn't clearly marked for certain people, or a plan wasn't clearly put in place. And so 100% would recommend that. On top of that, when you put things into a trust and then there's a transfer upon death, there could be some good tax benefits there too. And I won't go into it here. We won't go into it here. But there can be some step up in cost basis that you can take advantage of, right? And that really help protect the asset in some ways, and then your wealth preservation. But 100% would advise you to do it. If there's good options, yeah, absolutely. In fact, there's one person that we refer to a lot here in the North Orange County area that services all of California. Excellent trust attorney, and that's really who you're looking for.
Yeah.
And so we can maybe provide that in our Slack of who that
Yeah.
person is, and maybe
Yeah.
people, if they have good recommendations, they could put it there too.
Yeah, you don't want to probate things. I mean, probate attorneys there's great probate attorneys out there. They perform a necessary function in the law world, right? Because of situations where people don't have trusts or clear, directions of what to do with their estates when they die. Um, but uh, but I think just like a defense attorney who's also necessary, you don't want to have to use one, right? Like you did something wrong if you have to use a defense attorney, and you might have done something really wrong if you had to use a probate attorney. So you want to avoid the probate. Work with the estate attorneys. I mean, sometimes probate do estates as well, but point is, yeah, you want to get into a trust for sure, in my opinion,
Um,
my non-legal
one thing
opinion.
I learned there too is there's a professional like executors of trust, right? That
Yeah,
you can hire for a fee, and you recently went through the experience of this, but you can write them a letter as to like what your wishes are, again, more artistically than it is like, hey, divvy out your assets. Like, what do you want your kids' lives to be like? They ask you for a pretty artistic, like, kind of essay of what you would hope that would be like. And then they're put in charge to really, carry out the trust and make financial decisions based on your wishes, for especially kids that are young, right? And things like that. So something to look into. First American is one company that offers that type of service. And so if you're interested in that, that's available.
yeah, especially because if you have
Um,
multiple children, right, and you want to make it take, you know, you don't want to put the pressure on one kid to do something and then feel like the other ones are going to blame them for the decisions they're making, right? And then if you put it to all three kids, well, then how do they resolve, any kind of decisions, right? So like having somebody who's a third party but knows your wishes, kind of knows who you are and is making it objective and not a conflicted type of decision, right? About things that's a great alternative for that, to do that. Um,
yeah,
I know as things shape out sometimes in life, maybe one of the children kind of emerges as the one that definitely needs to be the person deciding things. I get that, too, but it's like early on, especially, you don't know how things are going to shape out. You don't know, and we assume so. Anyhow, but I'm sorry I cut you off, but I just think that's something like you mentioned that third party is always a good option. But um,
yeah. Yeah. Trust goes into a lot of things too. It's assets for sure. But they do ask you questions like, again, hey, upon your death, like, how would you like to be treated? Do you want music to be played if you're in a, comatose state, right? What kind of
yeah,
music do you want? Like, it's actually a weird thing to go through and kind of think about, but it's awesome in that all those things are taken care of so that your loved ones aren't thinking about this for you or making decisions on the fly, let's say,
yeah,
based on what they think you might have wanted or whatnot. And so
yeah,
it does kind of make things really nice, I think, for people
100%.
who are surviving you, right? And so something I highly, highly recommend. We would highly, highly recommend that. Um,
Yeah.
got another one. Um, let's start with this one. I have a friend that is looking for a side hustle and asked me if they should get into real estate. I think we have a lot of friends like that. How would you honestly answer that question right now? They were approached by someone from another brokerage who said they should join that other brokerage. Would you advise them to get their license and become a referral agent until they can commit to full time? What do you think, Pat?
Um, I d I don't like thinking of real estate as a side hustle, right? First of all, and I mean, not to be arrogant about it all, but to me, it'd be similar to saying, "Do you want to be a CPA as a side hustle, right? Or do you want to be an attorney as a side hustle?" Not to say that same. I just think that one of the issues in our industry is that we don't take it as seriously as we should, as far as a profession, right? As in a career, and something that how much work and time has to go into getting good at it. So I think that's where I would say, you know, I wouldn't say that's a good idea. Now, if someone says if side hustle, I'm taking that the wrong thing. If they mean, hey, I want to be a realtor, I don't have the full time to commit to it. I don't have the money to just jump into it. So I'd like to be able to like, do it on the side until I can, jump in all the way. Yeah, I think that's a reasonable path. Um, but I think the goal has to be set down like, hey, like you have to spend a lot of time though learning how to be good, because if you just get a client and you're working 10 hours a week at something, 20 hours a week, but none of that time's invested in learning and understanding the craft and understanding what goes into it, it's only spent like showing houses and doing the job. I think that you probably do a disservice to those clients and a disservice to our industry as well. So that's my thought on that. I think it has to be a decision to go into full time from the beginning, so you commit to the industry, to learning about the industry, learning about all that goes into being a realtor, taking pride in that, feeling like it's something that's a worthy profession, not like a way to make a little money on the side. That's what I would say. But what about you, Abe? What do you think?
You wouldn't hire a part-time lawyer to defend you or to help you prosecute something or someone in the most important case of your life, right? You wouldn't hire a part-time surgeon to come do a surgery for you. In the same way, that's how we hold people in real estate to that regard. I know it hasn't always been that way. The expressions haven't always been that way. The agents have always been that way, and that's really what's driven us to really work hard and build a good brokerage, so that we can fulfill that promise in some ways, right, with the agents that we work with. So yeah,
Yeah,
but you're right. You can be There's so many different circumstances, right? And it is like sometimes a transition from being an employee somewhere to then becoming self-employed. And there are ways to do that smart and not put yourself in a hole too much. But is the mentality to start that, hey, this is a profession that needs and demands and requires that level of commitment and like commitment to excellence. It is. And so it hopefully isn't a side hustle forever.
yeah. And I'd say, like, even just on top of that, just realize anything. I think no matter what it is, I think that anything you want to build wealth on and really become great at, it can't be a side hustle. It's got to be something you're all about. I think. I mean, I'm sure there's exceptions to any rule, but if you want to play the percentages, committing to one path in life and going all in on it is usually the way people become wealthy. It's not dabbling in this and that and having five things in the fire. Uh, you know, I've just never seen that in my life. I don't know anybody that's done really that well with that kind of attempt or that path. So anyhow,
And we kind of live in a culture too right now where I see these ads on Instagram or YouTube where it's like, I make 30 grand a month doing nothing. I had to like set up this like whatever marketing funnel or whatever it is. And
yeah,
and now like everything's like, yeah, unfortunately being an agent isn't quite that. I think for those who've been in the industry or done the work of being an agent, know that it's not the case. And so sometimes people who aren't, in the industry will equate, real estate to some type of passive income. Being a real estate agent is definitely not quite that. It gives you the funds then to invest maybe in some know-how on what to invest in, but it's definitely not a passive career by any sense. So
yeah. I think that's what we found. The
yeah,
problem that made us kind of weary of the companies that are offering the multi-level marketing kind of thing was that it invited a lot of that in, and that's what kind of finally was the last straw for me, was just seeing that kind of being the
right,
you know, prevalent force in the companies, right? So, um,
right.
yeah.
Think
Anything
maybe
else?
this last one. Yeah, we got one. Very simple question, but very, can have a deep answer. So, what would you advise a client who has some money coming to them and has historically not been great with money management? What kind of high yield savings account would you put your money in? Pros and cons. And so, um, yeah, you want to tackle that one, Matt?
Yeah. It's a great question. I mean, because anybody that invests will tell you, there's diversification is kind of one rule, right? The second rule is sort of not doing anything that you don't understand. Like if you listen to Warren Buffett, right? If you don't understand the very furthest edge of it, from edge to edge of what you're investing in, don't invest in it, right? That's a little more conservative. Definitely don't listen to your buddies about what to invest in unless your buddies have a lot of wealth and they have been, smart with what they've done. Um, but I guess the point is like, yeah, we know that it's at least you can get some interest on savings account now. It's probably the safest thing to do, right? But I would say that maybe trying to do something in the way of educating them, like maybe buy them some books on investing and say, without pointing out that hey, you're not that good at investing, unless you can say that to them. But maybe to say, hey, listen, almost like a Phil found, hey, listen, you're coming into, a lot of money here. I'm sure it's exciting. It's probably scary, but I know a lot of people in my life that have felt that way, and some have done well and some have not done so well. And what I find is like maybe having some literacy, like financial literacy right now would be a great thing for you, because that way you can, because everybody's gonna have an idea for you what to do with your money. You might even have some, but you won't really know what to do if you don't educate yourself on it. So maybe, and then maybe offer them some books. Like, there's some pretty classic books of like, even like the Investing for Dummies is actually supposed to be a pretty good book, with a lot of, maybe that's an insulting one to get to people, but I have some dummies books around here somewhere, like, and they're usually pretty well curated books. But I don't know. That would be my advice, is that, teach them to fish, sort of thing, right? Like try to be a part of that process for them. Um, Maybe even just the gesture of giving them some books on it might make them think a little bit more prudently about what to do with the money. Um, and Yeah, so that would be my thought. I mean, it's a tough question to answer, but Abe, you might have some better take on that.
No, I think that's right. There's a lot of high yield savings accounts out there. One that I use is like Marcus.com. I think it's a Goldman Sachs product. I think it yields like 4 or 4.5 or something like that, 4.5 annually. If you want to buy something like a T-bill, like a 6-month T-bill, 3-month T-bill, there's a lock-in period. Maybe that helps. Prevent someone from spending the money all too fast.
Yeah, lock-in periods could be a
And
good thing. Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
yeah, or a CD or something like that. I think T-bills, they're probably running high fours right now, or maybe some low fives, 5% yield. And then this is why we love real estate, right? Not that that should be the only option to people, but real estate is liquid, but it's not that liquid, right? It's a process to go through and sell a piece of real estate or a home, or a commercial building or something. And if you make the right move there, again, it's not a get rich quick thing overnight, but it is a wealth preservation, wealth building type of asset that, again, you may not be able to just click a couple buttons and sell. And so that's not a bad way to go too. And then index funds are always good. I know we're at the top of the market in terms of the stock market and whatnot. But if it's a sizable amount of money, before you make any stock picks of your own, I would maybe talk to an advisor and ask them to guide you and hear your plan on what you'd like to do with the money, or how you like to grow it, how you like to preserve it, and let the professionals kind of do that work for you. The fees aren't that bad these days. Um, and it keeps you from maybe making moves based off what your friend told you a good stock was or whatnot, and not knowing edge to edge what you're throwing your money into. And so I'd recommend that too. But yeah, real estate, it's the reason we're in it. I know myself, I like to have the funds somewhere where, they're safe, for generations. And for that
Right.
reason, real estate for me is the best one to put it into. And I know sometimes that's under fire, and you were in markets where it doesn't feel like it's yielding much. But I think when you think with a 10, 20, 30-year outlook versus 2-month, 3-month, 1 year, 2-year outlook, it's proven to be pretty safe, pretty good. So, um,
Yeah.
so real estate, you know, I
Yeah.
would
And,
throw
and
there too.
yeah, of course. And then also there is like, just have them hire a professional, right? They can get a wealth advisor, a fiduciary, someone who, different people have different opinions on whether you go with a fiduciary or not, but um, sometimes they can be a little more expensive, right? But they also have more rules, as far as like they can't, make money off of you just doing trades and things like that. There's a few more ethics they have to go by if you get a fiduciary wealth manager, right? So that might be something else for them. So that way they don't have to necessarily educate themselves. They just have to find one person that they can trust there, that really does this for a living, and has a track record. So that's another idea. Um,
The thing I love the question too is really when you're talking about real estate, you are having somewhat of an investment conversation with folks. You're not just talking about, hey, what color house do they want, right? What kind of floor plan
sure.
you're looking to, but that conversation is a really big part of it. And then educating yourself on what is out there and what the alternatives are, is probably a really good step. And so I think for that reason, I really appreciate the question.
Yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, 100%. Um, agreed. Well, gone a little
Sweet.
past our time today, but good discussion.
Yeah.
Um, cool.
Yeah.
Well, thank you all for tuning in here, and yeah, we'll see you guys next time. Any parting thoughts, Abe?
Yeah. No, have fun this weekend. Happy Memorial Day weekend. Stay
Yeah,
safe, and yeah,
yeah. Have
yeah,
fun
we'll
out there,
see you guys
guys.
soon. And yeah, absolutely. Send us questions too. Again, for Broker Brew, we'd love to keep on this and bring value to you guys. And so yeah, appreciate
Absolutely.
those questions.
Yep. All right, guys. Have a good Memorial Day.
All
See
right,
ya.
man.
Bye.
Yeah, see you guys soon.